I'm just going to do a quick introduction of Ben right here. Now, Ben has about 10 years of experience as an M&A lawyer, mergers and acquisitions. And I'm not going to name any of the deals he has done because I don't know what I can name and I don't like, let's just let him reveal it. But I mean, Ben has been involved in some pretty big ass deals, like some pretty big ass deals. Hi, Ben.
Hey, hey, Alex. Thanks for having me. It's so great to be here.
Thank you. And literally, like the way I usually like to start a conversation in the interview is to just ask people something about their childhood. Like when I ask you to tell me something about yourself, something that just springs to mind, something that describes you as you are, your personality. What do you think about when I say that?
Yeah, sure. No, happy to get into it, and maybe I'll just give a very quick commentary on your intro. So thank you for the introduction. I've certainly been involved in a lot of deals, a lot of big deals, but really as a member of a much broader team. I was a partner at Kirkland and Ellis, and then previous to that, I was an associate at Weil Gotshal, New York City, and these things take a village. So by no means was I somehow out here doing these complicated leverage buyouts or big transactions. I was merely one cog in a big and important wheel. But it was great. So to answer your question, Alex, in terms of childhood, yeah, I don't know. I mean, my dad's a lawyer. He doesn't practice anymore, so I always looked up to him and what he did, and um, I always thought that would be a vocation worth aspiring to. But yeah, I don't know. I played hockey. There was a time when I thought I was, going to be a hockey player, like I think a lot of little boys in Canada. But doesn't exactly work out that way for a lot of kids. And but yeah, no, I loved sports. I loved the social aspect of school, but I never really loved the academics aspect of school. Um, I it's funny, like looking back through old report cards and stuff like that. I think some teachers didn't necessarily think I had the focus to perhaps do a whole lot after school. But anyways, that's a little bit about me as a kid.
That's a lot of similarities with me because in high school I got into boxing, and for a good amount of years I really believed that boxing is it. Boxing is how I'm gonna make a living. And I neglected school so much that when I passed my end of high school exam to get my high school diploma, the fact that I passed shocked my headmaster. And I actually passed with a B plus, which shocked her even more. So I think we have a similar background in that.
Well, that's great. Good for you, man. Yeah, boxing school. Were you doing Western boxing or like kickboxing or?
Yeah, just normal Western boxing. I did some judo after I quit boxing, but boxing was my bread and butter. Have you ever done any like contact sports?
I have. So when I was in, I mean, I never like competed or anything other than some just in-house, jujitsu tournaments. But yeah, I picked up like Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when I was in college and did it for, I don't know, probably off and on for about 10 years. I don't, I'm old and fat and I've got two kids now, so I don't do that kind of, those days are long behind me. But yeah, like I went to, I mean, probably the peak of my enjoyment and of that activity for me is I went to Thailand by myself for like 6 weeks after. It's funny. It's actually very nominally related to being a lawyer. It's kind of a funny story. So to become a lawyer, for at least in Canada and in the United States, you have to pass a bar exam. So it's like an admission test. Pretty stressful. Kind of sucks. In Ontario, there are two full day exams spread out over 2 weeks, everybody's bent out of shape, everybody's uptight, and I booked a ticket to Thailand from Toronto, um, that left like hours after my exam ended. So my exam ends. I have no idea if I'm passing or failing. I get home, say, kiss my girlfriend goodbye, who's now, my beautiful wife and mother to my two beautiful children. And I say, I'm going to see you in, I don't know, 8 weeks, whatever. I can't even remember how long I was gone for. And, within a few hours, I was in the airport and on my way to Thailand. So it was pretty funny.
That's awesome. I mean, how was it? What was your experience? Because I am faced with a bit of solo traveling this year as well, but I've never done it before.
It was really cool. I mean, listen, I mean, it had the huge benefit of not being around all my stressed out law friends, because you don't want to be around a bunch of lawyers that are stressed out waiting to see if they've passed or failed an admissions test. So it was, it had enormous value of just being a world away, because I was pretty stressed out too. But yeah, the experience was awesome. I mean, rented a little moped, trained twice a day, and tried to make some friends, just some locals, and it was cool. It was some good memories for sure. I've like always had aspirations that maybe one day I'll do it again, but like I said, now I'm got two little kids running around, and a business. I'm sure we'll get into kind of my background a little bit more, and but I started a business as a law firm, so it's the days of me kind of going and traveling for a few weeks to Thailand might be a little bit behind me.
Are you not? Are you working remote? Are you working from home?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm licensed in Texas, New York, and Ontario. So basically, what that means is I can offer a pretty broad range of corporate M&A services to Canadian and U.S. clients. And yeah, predominantly I work from home. Um, we live in Northern Ontario. I mean, maybe it's not quite Northern Ontario, but it's a couple hours north of Toronto. So we live, yeah, we live kind of out in the boonies, but able to do basically everything from here, which is great. But I have clients that I travel into. I've got some clients based out of Toronto, so I'm in the city of Toronto pretty frequently, for in person meetings, working out of the office, and things like that. So yeah.
So you started out. We were born in Canada, but you eventually moved into the U.S. But I don't. I want to wind back a bit, and I want to ask you, how was life in college in Canada? In I believe. Well, can I name the town?
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure, totally.
Kingston. How was life there?
Yeah. No, no, you can name. I'm an open book. Thanks for asking. Yeah, Kingston. So Kingston, Ontario. It's beautiful. It's such a funny place. It's right on the water in Ontario. It's a little bit east of Toronto. It's kind of in between, Toronto and Montreal. For folks, broad strokes. And it's friends, buddies of mine, we always had the same joke, because when you go do campus visits, when you're picking a school, you go in the spring, and flowers are blooming, and it's sunny, it's warm. And this town, they call, Kingston, they call it like the limestone city. There's a whole bunch of old limestone buildings, and it's just beautiful. And you get really captivated by the beauty of this town when you're there in the spring visiting and doing a campus tour. And then, you enroll there, and then you realize that that window of beautiful weather is pretty much late spring, early summer. And then the rest is like windy and cold and raining and snowing and just kind of horrible. So it's pretty funny. So anyone who watches this who went to Queen's University in Kingston will probably have somewhat similar experiences where it's a bit of a rug pull. They show it to you when it's beautiful, and then you go in the winter and you live there, and it's pretty tough. So, but yeah, it's cool. The college is cool. Um, or the university was cool. We tend to call colleges universities in Canada. But yeah, it was great. I took I took poli sci, political science, and I mean, it's funny. Like I've always really, really loved having conversations and disagreements with folks. Like academically, like I love getting in debates. I love sparring with people. I just really love it, and I think that's what really attracted me to poli sci because candidly, you get a lot of really motivated, like, and a lot of times like activists, right? Like a lot, young people that are very, they're very passionate about what they believe in, and you get in these kind of really cool spirited debates. And I was never really one to kind of wear a team jersey in terms of like, you know, like in Canada, the two main parties are the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party. We have other parties as well, but those are the two main ones. But I just kind of loved sparring on issues. So yeah, so I loved it. It was really cool. But I mean, politics was never something I was gonna try to go into. So, but yeah, thought that was cool.
The plan wasn't necessarily to turn out into a lawyer. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, totally. No, I mean, I didn't. It's actually funny. I out of high school. So my mom's a teacher, my dad's a lawyer, and I have just the greatest admiration and respect for my mom and my dad. And they're both heroes of mine. So not surprisingly, at a high school, I mean, I really wanted to be a teacher because my mom was probably the biggest single influence of my life, and I thought I used to love coaching hockey and teaching kids sports, and yeah, I really wanted to be a teacher. So I actually applied out of high school to a lot of these teaching programs, and they didn't want me. So, which is kind of a theme. We'll get into it. We'll get into that a little later. But yeah, no, they didn't want me. I got rejected from basically everywhere. So, this is when I was in my senior year of high school, and I was, more focused on, spending time with my now wife, then girlfriend, and just my buddies, and didn't exactly wasn't the best student, and yeah, so I couldn't really get in. So I got into just like a general arts program, um, and yeah.
I think it's so beautiful that you guys have been together since high school and now you're married and you have kids. It's like it's a dream for many people.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I mean, it's great. She's the best. She's I mean, anything that I've ever done in my life is due to her. So she's been a huge support, and like, um, I mean, we'll kind of get into the story, but we moved to New York, and she had a great job in Toronto, but she left to just kind of help me follow my dream of becoming try to become some big shot lawyer in New York City, which I wasn't. To be clear, I was very much not a big shot lawyer. But when I was a young kid leaving Toronto, she followed me, and it was great. She's a great teammate.
What would you say is the maybe one or two things that have made your relationship successful? Because I think I don't know your relationship obviously, but I would assume it's a successful relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I mean, listen, I think like any relationship, there's always challenges, but I think, man, I don't know. This is great. I love this question because I certainly wasn't expecting to talk relationship stuff, but this is awesome. No, this is cool. I don't know. Listen, like we have very different interests, okay, and we're going to veer off a little bit from like M&A and lawyer and all that kind of stuff. But like, eh, we have different interests, and we have different political views on a lot of items, but we have just a profound love and respect for each other that I think it makes our relationship really work because we don't have to, like, I don't think my wife is expecting her partner to view the world the same way she does in order to open up and have a conversation, right? And similarly with me, I mean, I don't expect her to view the world the same way that I do. So we actually spar on a lot of things. I mean, it's funny. We lived in Texas, we lived in New York, we live here. So it's like on the big kind of third rail items, which, we can get into if you want. We certainly don't have to, but like we have different views on a lot of them, but whenever we chat, and it's not sort of like, oh, we don't, we don't discuss guns or abortion, or we don't, we do discuss it, but we discuss those items like respectfully with each other and with an open mind. And I respect her opinion on everything. We don't always agree, and but I think she respects mine too. So I think that's cool. I think that's certainly been a nice. We didn't intend for that to happen by any stretch. That's kind of just, you know, our marriage has sort of just evolved that way. But I know that there's a profound respect for each other's viewpoints, and she has her activities and things that she likes to do that maybe I don't always share in those same interests, and vice versa, and we give each other the space. So I think that's been a huge. I think that's just been a huge strength of our relationship, because we just kind of know that we're we're our own person, and can love and respect each other for who we are.
I think it's beautiful that you guys can respectfully disagree. And I think it also most likely balances you out and balances her out. Because, like, having somebody that you actually respect and that you actually like and that you actually can talk to, and having them attack your beliefs or your decisions in a way where you can actually, it can make you think, oh, I actually didn't think about that.
Totally agree. I mean, listen. So I talked about taking politics in college, and my favorite class was political philosophy, and John Stuart Mill and these other philosophers, and this whole idea of like dissenting opinions and dissenting viewpoints are tools in order to help get to help find truth, right? If you are on a if you're on a mission to find truth in the world, whatever you're doing, and you just surround yourself with people that already view the world the same way you do, and that have the same hypotheses that you do, you're never going to progress, right? Like, you need people to challenge your views, and sometimes those challenges will result in you changing your view a little bit, and maybe sometimes those challenges will result in you entrenching yourself in your view. But in either way, like, dissent is great. So this whole idea these days that, like, man, it's like, oh, I don't want to talk to that person because they believe X and Y. It's like, no, like, that's the wrong view. It's like, in my opinion, it's the wrong view. Like, people that you disagree with on items, bring those people in. Like, it's okay. Like, have conversations. It's okay. You might change your mind a little bit. You might not. It doesn't matter. But it's like, if you truly believe in the process of, like, progress, and finding truth, and improving ideas and improving viewpoints on the world, like, you can't just surround yourself with people that agree with you.
Yeah, you can't just throw yourself with yes people. It's not gonna work out. And I think really the issue of people being set in their ways and not being willing to debate with people of opposite views, I think that is very big in the US from the friends that I've had. It seems very separated, which is unfortunate.
I agree. I would love, maybe I'll get an invite to Romania, and we'll come hang out one day. We'll see how this podcast goes, and maybe if you like it, I'll get an invite. But no, I'm with you. I think it's certainly not exclusive. I mean, I think it's a huge testament to my friends, and the people that are close to me, who I love deeply, that we share pretty radically different views on a lot of things. Like, credit to them, because I know that they love me and I love them, and that's great. But I would say, unfortunately, you do often find there's a lot of divisiveness. In the States, I notice it in Canada too, where I think there's just not a there's just not a lot of tolerance for people that have different viewpoints, and there's been this kind of conflation, I think, where people view an idea as perhaps synonymous with, like, an actual act of violence. And I think that if in your head like if you said something to me, Alex, and I truly believed in my core that your words were an act of violence against me or a group or something, then you can understand why I might react very negatively towards that, right? And maybe respond with violence or not talk to you and shut you out of my life or who knows. But um, I think it's just it's too bad because I think ideas are generally not violent, and ideas are just ideas, and conversations can be conversations. But I agree with you. I mean, it's divisive. It's pretty disappointing. I've had a lot of negative experiences, unfortunately, but a lot of positive ones too, and a lot of good people in my life.
Definitely. I have a lot of friends from the US that I disagree with, and on both sides of the spectrum, because I am a very, I like to think of myself as a very adaptable, very middle of the fence type person when it comes to most political things. Really, like my main core belief in politics is just leave me alone, let me do my business, and everything else is fine, fine by me.
Yeah, nice. Oh, good for you. Well, hey, I get it. I totally get it.
So you finished college, went to Thailand, had a heap of lot of fun in there, and you came back to notice that you passed the bar exam.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, and
I did. Yeah.
you could have failed it and then passed it as the second
Barely.
time.
Barely. They made a mistake, I'm sure, and they let me sneak in. So
No, but you could have passed it the second time around. Because, like for example, with my driver's license, it took me 3 tries to get it once, and I've been losing it ever since. So yeah, not a very good driver. I should probably stop. After you got your bar exam, now you can be a lawyer. What did you do next? How did you get your first job? How did you just apply, or did you know somebody, or how did it happen?
yeah, sure. So the way the recruitment process happens in Toronto, and it's by no means for everybody. It's kind of just for a lot of the big firms. There's always exceptions to the rule, so I don't want folks to kind of hear this and think this is the only path because one thing I'd say is just when you have a desire and a drive, and just keep trying because there's a lot of unconventional paths that people can take to be successful in whatever they choose to define success as, right? So anyways, so I applied to a whole bunch of corporate firms while I was in law school, and was lucky enough to I started at a firm called Blake Castles and Graydon, based in Toronto. They're a big Canadian corporate firm, very good, great mentors. Really, love my experience there. And the way that it generally works is you'll spend a summer there, so call it 2.5 months in between your second and third year of law school. So you spend it's kind of like a little mini apprenticeship, and then you write the bar, and then you come back for a longer apprenticeship term. They call it articling in Ontario. I think it's a 10-month term, and it's basically it's. I try to describe it to folks who may be more familiar in the medical side, like residency, like a medical resident. So, they've gone to school, perhaps they've passed their exams, etc, but for policy reasons, the government is not quite ready to let them operate on patients without supervision yet. Same thing with lawyers. So you have a 10-month period where you article, where you work in a law firm and you basically perform the tasks of like a very junior lawyer, but you're doing it under the supervision of actual lawyers, and you can't technically give legal advice or anything like that. So I did that at Blake's. And again, sort of a bit of a theme here with when I applied to university, but I really I really wanted to be a litigator. I thought litigation was for me. I thought getting in court and arguing, and kind of what we talked about. Like, I love the idea of sparring intellectually and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, this is what I want. I put all my eggs in that basket. I went really hard on litigation. And when it came back to the end of the term, so just taking a step back, what happens is the articling class will complete the 10 months. And at my firm, you did several rotations. So I did restructuring, banking and finance, M&A, and litigation. And all of the articling students are kind of trying to vie for the groups that they want. And it's a bit of a courtship process. And hopefully by the end of the term, if Alex, let's say you really liked banking, you hope that banking really likes you. And then if they want, they can offer you full-time employment. And not everybody gets offered full-time employment. I think in my group, like maybe 70% of people got offered full-time employment, which is pretty good. But there's yeah, but like 30% of kids, I say kids, but 30% of like articling students don't get an offer to come back. Which is tough, right?
Can they try again or do something to keep on pushing?
You can try, yeah. I mean, generally, what would happen if you don't get an offer to come back, you would then go into the employment pool and try and find a job somewhere else, like with a different firm or something. The good thing for you, if you do complete your articles and let's say you wanted, and some people don't want to get hired back, right? Some people do the 10 months and they're like, you know what, this isn't for me. I don't want to be in a big law firm. I kind of want to go do my own thing, and like that's cool too. So, but for folks that sort of perhaps wanted to get hired back and didn't, they would just try to go find another job. It can be a bit tough. It's a little bit of a ruthless system, in my opinion. But anyway, so I go through litigation. I think this is what I want. I want to do this. I'm schmoozing as best I can. I'm trying really hard, and by the end of the term, they say, Ben, good news, bad news. Good news is we like you. Bad news is, litigation doesn't like you. So they don't want to offer you a job. So I thought, perfect. That's great. And anyway, so it was pretty tough, but credit to Blake's because they decided that I guess they thought I was a good kid and had some potential, and they said, listen, we know you want litigation. We can't offer it to you, but we might have a spot somewhere else in a transactional group. And they wouldn't even tell me which one. Would you be interested in it? Like, would you, and I think they wanted to know if I was going to give it a real shot. Right. And I basically said, yeah, like, look, I didn't just to be perfectly open. I mean, I had a lot of anxiety about not getting hired back. It would have been a real like hit to my self-confidence, and I would have been, pretty shattered if that happened, which is a whole other discussion. But yeah, I didn't want to, not have a job, just to be candid. So I said, listen, if it's not meant to be in litigation, it's no problem. I'll do my best in whatever group, should you make me an offer, I'll commit and I'll go both feet in and I'll try my best. So, yeah, they made me an offer in the M&A group, which was great. And, yeah, that's where I started. So that's how I became an M&A lawyer. I didn't even really want to be an M&A lawyer. I wanted to be a litigator. But that's how the universe happens.
Looking back on it, do you think, like right now, with all of your experiences and everything, would you rather have been a litigator, or do you think it turned out better than you wanted it to turn out?
It's a great question, and I'm going to give you a shitty lawyer answer, which is, I mean, I don't really know. Just the classic bullshit lawyer answer. Can we swear on this or no? Is that if you don't?
Go ahead, have your fun.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, no, just the classic bullshit answer. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, sometimes I look back and I think, you know, being a litigator could have been very interesting, but also I feel very fortunate to have taken the path that I took, and I think I've had great experiences. And I mean, look, we moved to New York City, and that was really cool. A couple of kids from a relatively small town and near like outside of Toronto, we got a chance to go live in New York City and live a cool life for several years, and then got a chance to go to Dallas and be part of a team that helped open up a new office for one of the biggest firms in the world. And those experiences were awesome, and I don't know that they would have happened if I was in litigation. So I'm very, yeah, who knows? And like, I mean, this is the advice that, whenever I'm talking to like a junior lawyer or someone in law school, I say, look, like, keep an open mind. I mean, I think there's a lot of value. I think there's a lot of value in trying to steer your career. I totally acknowledge that, and I agree with that. If you have no, if you're totally passive, then who knows where you will go, and maybe you won't achieve what you want to achieve. So you need some kind of active steering. Having said that, if the universe opens an opportunity, have an open mind, right? Like, you just it will serve you well to have an open mind to new opportunities, because you never know where life could be. Look, if you're a law student and you always wanted to be a litigator, and that's all you want, go for it. And someone says, we want to offer you an M&A job, but if in your heart of hearts it's litigation, then don't take the job, and go pursue a litigation career, and that's cool. For me, that wasn't where my heart was, um, in absolute terms, and I decided to try and be more open to the opportunity. And now I really love what I do. I mean, I think being an M&A lawyer is awesome. You help clients solve problems. There's a ton of advocacy, right? You're constantly arguing and trying to persuade people of your position. So it's not just paper pushing and that kind of stuff. It's you still get to use your advocacy chops quite a bit, and it's been good.
I totally agree about keeping an open mind. And I also think that we can always learn to enjoy our work, even if we don't enjoy it when we start out. Because I am a software engineer right now, but if I look back 3 years from now, I hated this thing. I disliked it completely. It was extremely frustrating and amazingly hard. And I think I have been a bit crazy to actually stick to it for the first 6 to 12 months until I actually started to enjoy it. But it's fine.
That's great advice. I mean, listen, there's so many like sayings and cliches, strong winds make for smooth sailors is a good one. And, trees, strong trees grow in wind and all that stuff. But, I mean, I think it's true, right? Like events of adversity and events of challenge are opportunities for growth. It doesn't matter if that's in your personal life, in your professional life, in your relationship. Um, there are opportunities for growth. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting people should go and seek out traumatic events and scar themselves, but like, that's going through life. Like, life is challenging, and I think if you view these challenges through the lens of like, this is an opportunity, I think you're going to be better served. Because I mean, I agree. I mean, like, looking back in my career, and I'm still learning a ton, and now I'm starting my own business, and now there's really no safety net. Like, I don't have another colleague I can knock on their door and say, hey, what do you think about this? Like, it's, so there's a whole new set of anxieties. But looking back throughout my career, the opportunities where I grew the most as an attorney are came from like the shittiest and most challenging events. um, like sincerely. So you got to just understand. I don't want to say you have to embrace those, because I don't want to sound like too cliche, but you got to at least appreciate that these are necessary events in the development of someone who's going to be competent, going to be.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Can't can't say anything in disagreement to that. So you got hired at that law firm in Canada, stayed there for a few years, enjoyed your time, learned a lot, most likely. And then, straight out of nowhere, at least to me right now, you moved to New York. How did that came about? Why did you do it?
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, so I was at Blake's for a couple of years, and I still remember the phone call, but I just got a phone call from a headhunter, from a recruiter that was based in New York City, that worked with a couple, New York law firms. And the thing about the legal market in the United States in Canada too, but at least the United States market's just bigger, so they tend to, the extremes are felt a little bit more severely. Um, yeah, so I get a call from a recruiter, and they're basically like, look, the hiring market in New York is really bustling right now, and they like, the New York firms like people like you with your background from firms like Blake's. If you're at all interested in, you know, exploring what life would be like living in one of the world's greatest cities and, basically making 2x your current comp, you should come down and meet with some firms. So it was a pretty easy pitch. I mean, my wife and I, we didn't have any had no kids at the time, and we thought, yeah, this could be kind of interesting. So we went down to New York for a couple days, the two of us, and I met with, I think it was 6 different firms, and yeah, we just kind of thought, wow, this could be pretty exciting. We weren't planning it. We weren't actively trying to get to New York. We loved being in Toronto. That's where our family was, our friends. We had, enjoyed where we worked, but it was a pretty good sales pitch, right? You want to go move to New York City and experience that, and make twice as much money. It's yeah, it wasn't the hardest sales pitch. So
Yeah, but obviously, like, I going back to your relationship, you had to convince your wife to leave her job and come with you, which it seems to you like for you it wasn't a hard pitch, but some people, I can imagine it's hard.
yeah, she was great. Um, New York was awesome. I mean, and I think before we had our tech issues, I think you were asking, in terms of my wife Lauren, her deciding to go. I mean, we made the decision together, and I think that it was really appealing for her as well. I think an opportunity to live in a big city. She, yeah, I think had a lot of. I think there was a lot of interest there for her, but I mean, it was funny. Like, as hard as it was on me going to a new city, new job, trying to learn, a new legal system, do leverage buyouts, which are, very different from just your typical M&A deals, and kind of like a, going to the lion's den. It was really hard for her too, because, she had to say goodbye to her job and her friends and her family, and she didn't have the crutch of, like, the office or a job to kind of lean on while she was there. So it was really tough. It was tough for both of us. It was really tough on her. She really, she really proved her resilience and kind of hanging with it, because the first couple months, like the first year, was tough. I think people had the wrong idea that, she was gonna my wife was gonna just kind of enjoy, some leisurely life in New York City, and, go for fancy lunches and this and that. But the truth is, it's hard when you don't have your job to kind of help give you meaning and give you a reason to get up every morning. It can be challenging, and so it was tough. It was tough on both of us. It was really tough on her, but she's a trooper, and she hung in there, and she volunteered, um, and sorry, I should explain. I mean, the reason why she wasn't really all that able to get a job wasn't because she's not capable. She's enormously capable. It was just for immigration reasons. It's pretty hard to get a visa, even as a Canadian in the United States, unless you're like, it was easier for me as a lawyer, but, if you're not a lawyer or certain other, designated occupations, it can be pretty tough. So, anyways, that was that. And how is New York? I mean, New York was sweet. Like, it was a lot of fun. Met some great friends, and still have great friends there. It was really, it was hard. Like, it was really, the pace of deals was very different from what I was used to. The type of clients were different from what I was used to. You know, just to give you a bit of background, I mean, when people say they do M&A work, right, that can mean a huge degree of different activities. It could be, public company M&A. It could be doing private M&A, but for public companies and strategic investors. It could be, leverage buyouts, which are predominantly for private equity sponsors. And what I was doing predominantly in New York was the latter bucket.
Can you explain the differences between all of those?
Yeah, sure. So public company M&A would be if you were looking to acquire uh, an entity that is already listed on a securities exchange. Okay, they're a reporting issuer. So like your classic kind of public M&A example would be like, let's say there's two public companies and they decide to merge together. Okay, so both businesses are reporting. They have certain disclosure obligations that they're already making. Um, their shareholder base is very, very diverse, right? Like, you could have several thousand shareholders in a public company, right? Like Apple's a public company, Amazon's a public company. There are just, tons and tons of shareholders, right? That aren't intimately involved in the operation of the business. They don't actually have any real access to management. If you own a stock of Amazon, you can't call Jeff Bezos. You can't call your boy up and be like, hey Jeff, like, how are we doing? So, and what that means, like, and how that kind of translates in the differences in M&A is, one of the big differences is in a public company M&A deal, there's often really no recourse for any potential like breaches of reps and warranties and things like that, because you don't really have shareholders standing behind reps that a business is making. Um, Again, not to get too esoteric, but like taking just like one giant step back, like if you were going to sell me your car, okay, like that's an M&A deal. Okay, you're going to sell me an asset. I might ask you certain things about the car, like, is it, how old is it? Right. Do you own the car? Like, are you the actual owner, or does, maybe someone else own it? How many miles are on it? Things like that. I'm going to buy the car. And if it turns out after I bought the car, some of those things that you told me weren't true. Okay. Let's say you said it was a 2020, but it turns out it was a 2018. Let's say you said there was only, 10,000 miles on it, but it turns out there was actually 15,000 miles.
You can actually get criminally charged for that in Romania. But go ahead. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah. So again, and I want to sort of distinguish between like intentionally lying and committing fraud, which obviously is bad, and you could, face fraud implications in the States and in Canada as well. But I'm talking like, let's say just like an innocent mistake, right? Like, oh, you know what, I really thought, I bought the car from someone else and I thought it was in zero accidents. And it turns out I buy the car and you know what, through some method, I find out that the car actually was in some pretty big accidents that makes it maybe hard to get insurance. The value of the car that I just bought is now less than what I expected when I bought it, right? So in a typical M&A construct, I could, again, it depends on the contract and all that kind of stuff. That's why you should get good lawyers to help you with any M&A work. I could probably sue you. I could probably make a claim, and I could say, hey, Alex, I spent, I bought this car from you for $1,000, and you made a promise to me, you made a representation to me that it had been in no prior accidents. Okay. And it turns out it actually had been in a prior accident. And as a result, maybe the car is now worth, only $500, something like that. I could generally make a claim against you for the loss, okay? Because you're standing behind the product, like you sold me the car. In a public M&A context, you can't do that. Like if Amazon merges with Apple and it turns out to be some, inaccuracies of some reps and warranties that happen in the course of the deal, like you're not going to be able to sue, your grandma who owns a bit of Apple stock and say, hey, help me cover this loss. So like that's one of the big differences between public company M&A and private company M&A. It's like the recourse. You just generally don't have like sellers standing behind promises that get made just because it's such a diffuse shareholder base. There's other differences, like the public disclosure elements are different. Private company M&A was kind of like that car example we talked about. Any two people could do it. A lot of businesses will acquire companies private businesses, if they think there are synergies to be made. Like synergies is a fancy, you know, business school word for when some company will complement an existing platform you already have, right? So if you're wanting to, yeah, like if you want to, if you're a car manufacturer and you want to buy a parts maker, right? So now I no longer have to get the parts from a third party. I can maybe bring that internally, bring those processes internally, save some money, create some synergies. Um, as an M&A lawyer, I mean, you know, some of the things that you think about are, post-closing recourse, deal certainty, all that kind of fun stuff. Leverage buyouts for private equity sponsors, so like Blackstone, KKR, Apollo, like, there's a lot of big blue chip private equity sponsor names in the industry. And there's a lot of differences, which we could cover in a whole other podcast. M&A, like leverage buyouts for private equity sponsors, there are a lot of differences between that type of M&A and the preceding, types of M&A described. Like even private, just regular private M&A, and a leverage buyout with a private equity sponsor are so vastly different. And I'll touch on a couple of reasons why. One is private equity sponsors generally use leverage, right? They use debt to finance the transaction, which you don't necessarily have to. And a lot of strategic investors don't do it in a typical private M&A deal. Like if Amazon is trying to buy a business, I mean, Amazon has a ton of cash on their balance sheet. They may choose to use debt. They might decide to do that, but they certainly don't have to, depending on the size of the deal. Private equity sponsors, generally, the way they try to make really good returns is they use leverage, right? And leverage will help increase the returns on their equity investment. So if it's a transaction for $100, they might use $80 worth of debt and $20 worth of equity. Okay, that's one big difference in terms of private equity M&A deals versus just typical private M&A deals. Another big difference is private equity guys are generally not operators. Okay, so they might have some operating partners that they work with, but they're generally like Blackstone. Like Blackstone's technology fund, while they may be very tech savvy, if they're looking to buy, a payment processing technology business, they probably don't have all the internal expertise to actually run that business. So they're going to really try and rely on, typically it's existing management, but sometimes they'll want to bring in a different management team and incentivize that management team to really grow the business. So another key feature of private equity deals are things like incentive equity, right? It's critically important to understand the relationship between a management team and an equity investor, and how to try and create alignment and incentives in order to help to incentivize the operating team to grow the business. There's a lot of really really interesting features of a private equity deal as it relates to like closing certainty and like debt constructs that are kind of unique, right? We could probably do a whole separate talk on it, but anyways, like suffice it to say, and I can't even remember how we got into this, but learning how to do those deals in New York was pretty interesting and really challenging and really different from what I was doing in Toronto.
Very, very different type of deals too.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like, I mean, this is, this is what I would say for anyone listening who's like thinking about doing an M&A deal, whether they're an entrepreneur and they're looking to buy a small business or whatever. Like M&A work can be very different and very varied and very specific. So, Alex might be, the world's greatest public company M&A lawyer. But if the deal I'm looking at is a private equity leverage buyout, Alex maybe would not be the best suited M&A lawyer to handle that transaction, and vice versa. Right. So unfortunately, we see it a lot of times, or I've seen it a lot of times, where lawyers can be very good marketers and be very good at pitching clients certain work. And sometimes, candidly, the wrong lawyers get selected for the wrong mandates because, there really are a lot of specializations within M&A.
Where would you say you are specialized? What type of deals do you usually see?
Look, my background for the most part is private equity leverage buyouts. Having said that, as a result of starting my own firm, I am most certainly moving in towards smaller deals as well. And part of what I think really gets me excited about opening my own firm is the ability to work with founders and small business owners that are looking for liquidity and looking to help get an exit, and really helping protect their interests when someone on the other side of the table, like those are the clients that I used to work for, right? So like I've done a lot of deals on the other side, on the acquirer side, whether it's a financial buyer, whether it's a strategic buyer. I've done both, and I've done a ton of them. Um, so yeah, so I think, I mean, look, my specialty and my expertise is definitely in the private M&A context, private equity in particular, but really anything private M&A, because I've just done a ton. And the other thing I'd say is, like, I mean, lawyers love to talk about market terms, right? Like, oh, this is market, that's market, in order to try and justify certain positions. But I think that, really the best lawyers out there and the best advisors out there, not just in law, can really tie their positions, their asks, to just like first principles in terms of what they're trying to get for their client, right? So it's not, if you and I were doing a deal and there was an issue that came up where we disagreed, and we're trying to, get our respective positions for our client, and your answer was, or your argument was, well, hey, I view this term as market. I don't think that's overly persuasive when someone could say, well, here's why we actually need that, and we can tie it into closing risk or financing risk or whatever, right? So I think when you can tie things back to first principles, you're going to serve yourself really well.
You will have to delve a bit deeper into this because you kind of lost me. I don't know what is market means,
Yeah, sure.
and I need to understand more about first principles. And also, by the way, I just want to compliment you real quick. You have a really, I've noticed throughout the interview, you have a really good memory of like, oh yeah, he asked me that, then he asked me the other, but I'm gonna let you go.
Good. Well, I'm glad. Listen, it's this is a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying doing it. So maybe to take a little step backwards, and again, I'm sorry. I think I'm probably getting a little bit too esoteric, but when people say like a term is market, what they're trying to say is that there is a understood marketplace and an understood norm when it comes to a specific deal term. Okay, so like for example, if um, if you were selling me your car, we'll use this car example. If you were selling me your car and I asked for maybe a holdback or an escrow equal to, I don't know, 10% of the purchase price. Okay. I might I might say, that's a market term. And you should just agree to it because it's market and we do so many deals in this space. That's just sort of it's just kind of the standard and the norm. So when someone says it's market, that is, kind of lawyer or banker speak for it's a norm.
I think I get it. So basically, in my example, if I were to want to buy a SaaS company that is small, say a million EBITDA, and usually may or may not be correct. This number may or may not be correct, but let's say usually these companies go for 3 to 6 times the EBITDA. If the buyer tells me, or if I tell the buyer, hey, I want to buy it at 5 times EBITDA, and I tell him just because that's market, that's usual, right? But then he tells me, no, 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 Alex, we're not going to sell this to you at market because this is a very strategic purchase for you because your other business that you own goes very well with this business.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, no, I think that could definitely be a case where that comes up. I think probably, you know, I'm thinking more of it in terms of other risk allocation terms and not valuation, but it certainly could come up as it relates to valuation, right? Like, you could have this, your lawyers could have debates on, market terms and this and that. And you could certainly have debates, among buyer and seller on valuation terms. And you guys could say, look, I think it's customary to add, for these add backs in EBITDA, and the other side may say they don't think it's customary, and you can have certain arguments. So totally agree. I think it's a great example, and you get in these fights all the time. But again, I think that really good advocacy is not really, trying to rely on some amorphous argument like, this is a market term or this isn't a market term. And better advocacy is saying, well, here's why I can only pay this multiple, because, for all these reasons, I think the valuation is really going to shake out this way. And here's why I dispute your assertion that it's going to shake out that way. So, again, it's a little bit, kind of got off on a bit of a tangent, but, I think it's really important for any young lawyers that happen to be listening to this, to really focus on the merits behind any arguments you make, right? Don't hide behind market. It's a lazy argument. It's lazy. Focus on the first principles. And whenever you, like, for any business folks out there that are getting advice from counsel or from other advisors, like, make them explain things to you. Like, if a lawyer can't tell you why you wanted indemnity in one case or are okay living without it in another case or whatever, it might be showing a lack of sophistication, just to be candid. So, you should push your advisors.
I think I'm good. Me personally, I think I'm good at pushing for answers, but then again, that's just me applauding my laurels. Let's go a bit into just deals. I have one more thing to know about like your story, but let's go into deals since we kind of naturally rolled into this subject. I'm curious whether, like, in your experience, the biggest, well, okay, no, I have to ask the question because the question about your journey, because it kind of leads into a few questions. Um, what is the reason you came back to Canada and started your own firm?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I had a great job in Dallas. I was a partner at a really great law firm as a junior partner, not a big boy partner, but it was still pretty good gig. Um, Family reasons, just to be candid. Yeah. So maybe I won't get too into it in a public forum, but it was family reasons that kind of wanted us to come back. Um, the love we have for our parents, Lauren's parents and my parents, and we have two little boys, 2 and 4, and we wanted them to just spend a lot more good quality time with their respective grandparents. So that was really, I mean, look, the pandemic was obviously really, really tough on everybody. And we were living in Dallas with 2 young kids, and my wife was pregnant with our second pretty much during, she got pregnant like during the pandemic, and traveling was exceedingly difficult. Both sets of grandparents came down to help when the kids were born, or when our second was born, which was awesome. But I mean, it was really tough, and I think the restrictions and the lockdowns, and the restrictions on travel that we experienced during the pandemic really emphasized the distance between us. Right, when we moved to Dallas, we thought Dallas and Toronto aren't that far, a couple hours in the air on a flight, not a big deal. But the pandemic kind of changed our perspective in that a little bit. And during the pandemic, we thought, okay, maybe we should start to think about potentially relocating home, because we love Dallas. We love Dallas. We had a beautiful house there. We bought, the first and only house we've ever purchased was in Dallas, and yeah, it was great. So came back for family reasons, and then contemporaneous with the move, I just decided, look, I've been at a big law firm for over 10 years. I've done a lot of work and been on big teams, and it's time to just bet on myself and go on my own, because I've always wanted to be on my own. Being in a law firm is great in a lot of reasons. It also sucks in a lot of reasons. Generally you have just so many people internally that you report to, in addition to your clients, and I just decided, I just I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to write emails in the style that, if Alex, if you were my boss, if you were the senior partner on a file, I didn't want to have to rewrite my emails to have them be kind of in your preferred style when, my voice is a little different, and stuff like that. I just thought I'm going to go off on my own.
No, I totally agree. There's a lot of trade-offs in between working for yourself or working with a really small team versus working in a bigger company with a more stricter setting. I see that myself.
No, I totally agree. I mean, there's advantages and there's drawbacks, right? I mean, I you know, like obviously a huge advantage of working at a business. I mean, you get a paycheck, right? Like you could be slow, and you're gonna get a paycheck. I'm working for myself. I mean, you're not unless you're able to source work and get clients and have clients, be happy with the work you're doing. Like you're not getting a paycheck, and I got some hungry mouths to feed. So it's definitely challenging.
How do you source deals right now?
To be fully transparent and candid, I mean, I'm still starting and it's tough. It's a challenge. Like I would be totally disingenuous if I told you that I had it figured out. I mean, um, I've relied on a lot of personal referrals and my network, and I've had some really good friends that have really gone into the corners for me and passed my name on to other people and said, hey, you got to talk to Benny. He's a great lawyer. If you need any corporate or M&A help, you should talk to him. And that has produced a little bit. I started trying to be more active on Twitter, which is, I think, how you and I came across each other because I see all these guys on Twitter, and I've sourced zero work from Twitter. I think that perhaps is a reflection on the quality of my content, which is perhaps not great. But yeah, I mean, I'm just trying a lot of things. I haven't figured it out, but I've certainly, relied on good referral sources. I mean, one thing I would say, and any advice I would have for people starting out is like, there's just no substitute for just doing a really good job, right? Focus on service, focus on quality of product, and like spend less time posting on Twitter and more time just like being a fucking really good lawyer. And in my opinion, obviously if you can do both, great, whatever. But you know, the best business I've had so far as a result of starting my own law firm have been people that knew me when I was at a bigger firm and worked with me at a bigger firm and we're like, hey, we want to stay in business. Like, you're on your own. Let's keep this relationship up. It's okay that you're no longer, a partner at Kirkland. Let's continue this relationship because they really believed in like the product and the service that I was offering. Okay, so number one advice to any kind of young people out there: you got to focus on product. You got to focus on your service because if you're not good, it doesn't matter what you post, it's going to catch up to you. It doesn't matter how good your marketing is, your email, your website, all that stuff, it's going to catch up to you. Just be the best whatever that you can be.
I totally agree with my father, who has been a fairly successful businessman in his life, especially given where he's come from. He has this saying: advertising and marketing is the mother of all commerce, but word of mouth is the father of all commerce. He really loves saying. And I totally agree. It's like, yeah, marketing has a place, and a lot of people source deals, whether in M&A or in other places, through Twitter, through content. But I don't think there's a substitute for just doing a really good job and having repeat customers and having people refer you to other good customers.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, listen, that's kind of my goal. Like, obviously, if anyone in the Twitterverse sees maybe some commentary I have, and they're like, "Hey, this guy seems thoughtful on this issue, and maybe we should chat," that'd be awesome, and I would encourage and welcome any of those conversations. But I mean, no one's gonna hire me because I'm good at posting like a stupid meme or something on Twitter or like some kind of takes because I mean, to be candid, I think a lot of the takes on Twitter are pretty bad when it comes to M&A, and unfortunately, I think they mostly come from third party advisors that seek to benefit off those takes, and yeah, so that's just kind of it.
We're gonna talk about deals, but I think if anybody's watching this, I can definitely vouch for the fact that you have done a lot of deals. And I'm saying this again, maybe I'm a broken record machine, but you have done deals. You have done big deals. You have done a lot of them. I think you have a great background. It so seems. Can you only work in the, like, how does this thing work where you can only advise in like places where you're licensed at? Like, for example, let's say I have a company out of the United Arab Emirates and I want to buy a company in the United States.
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, listen, that's it. That is a what a great question. So, for ethical reasons, and to comply with not only ethical responsibilities, but whatever licensing bodies lawyers are governed by, you generally can only. I mean, it's not general. Like you can only really give legal advice in jurisdictions where you're licensed. So I can only give legal advice for Ontario law and New York law and Texas law, and then obviously federal law in both the United States and in Canada. Um, having said that, I gotta let my dog in. Just give me a second. Having said that, M&A deals. Sorry, come on, Wally. Wally, you gotta stop. I know he's great. He in out, in out, in out. He's a great dog. Okay, sorry. So I guess yeah, just to back up. So for ethical reasons and in order to stay within the rules of whatever governing body you're that governs your law license, you can only provide legal advice in the jurisdictions in which you're licensed. So for me, that would be Ontario, Texas, New York, and then federally Canada and the United States. So if there was a deal where a company in the UAE was looking, a buyer in the UAE was looking to buy a target in the United States, I could certainly help with that, and I could certainly give advice on, look, here's what sellers in the United States would be expecting in terms of deal structure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I couldn't advise on any UAE specific law, right? I couldn't give them advice on, hey, in the UAE, you might have this regulatory filing, you might have that regulatory filing. I couldn't do it, and it brings up a great question because if you're doing $1 billion merger, okay, and you have a UAE buyer, and let's say you have a UAE buyer and they want to buy a business that's based in Houston, Texas, but that business based in Houston, Texas also has operations in Romania, okay, and Canada, let's say, and it's a huge deal, okay, and you're representing the buyer, chances are you're going to have good counsel that is familiar with what you care about from a UAE perspective. Okay. So you might have local UAE counsel. You'll probably want primary deal counsel that's US based, I would think, to really run the show, especially if it's a competitive process and there's, it's a really good asset based in Houston. Like you'll want to have some real good local US expertise. But you'll probably also want to hire local expertise in Romania and in Canada. And the legal bill for a deal like that, it could be quite large because you're probably, you're going to get advisors in different places. But again, you're talking about $1 billion asset. In the grand scheme of things, if your legal bill, goes up an incremental $500,000, it's probably money very well spent to make sure that you're not going to be offside any regulatory laws in Canada, Romania, UAE, or United States. Okay. And that's a total, like that is a total, that perspective makes a lot of sense. Having said that, I think a really important feature of giving good legal advice to clients is helping them understand and helping them make educated, risk-informed decisions, not just about the deal itself, but about resources they use in the deal, and should they hire local counsel in this jurisdiction? So, for example, let's say it's not $1 billion deal. Let's say it's a $1 million deal. Let's just say, hypothetically, let's say it's a $1 million deal. And instead of, it being in like the oil and gas, industry, let's say it's in, I don't know, the widget making industry, right? Something pretty benign. And let's say the operations in Romania and in Canada are so infinitesimally small. They have, one independent contractor there, or maybe they have a customer there or something. You might make a decision for business reasons that you're not going to go hire 5 different lawyers in 5 different countries to, to pull the thread, to pull every little thread you can on this deal. You might, for commercial reasons, make a decision that, maybe we don't want to hire a local Canadian counsel because the operations are so small. And that's a decision you'd have to make deal by deal. And that's why I think it's really good to get really good, competent advice from an attorney, whoever your main deal counsel is, to help you work through those decisions. Because, look, like we're all, these are commercial entities, and they want to make smart commercial decisions. They don't want to go throw, if it's $1 million deal, they don't want to spend $3 million on legal fees. Like that generally wouldn't make a lot of sense. But you need to talk to a really good lawyer who's going to really help you make sure that you don't miss the big things that you don't want to miss. Right. So like, there might be a really compelling reason to hire local counsel in Romania or in Canada based on certain specific facts that might be independent of how big the operations are there. Okay. And I'm getting a little esoteric, but I think like broad strokes, big deal. You're spending a lot of resources. You'll probably have a lot of local counsel, and you'll probably have a pretty big team. You'll want one group to kind of manage it. Something like, like that'd be a position that I've been in, right? That I could do. But for a smaller deal, you'll really want an advisor who will work with you and educate you to help you understand, okay, well, here are the places we probably should hire in internal additional resources, and maybe here are some places we maybe don't need to. So I don't know if that makes sense or answers your question, but
It makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know about the viewers that are gonna watch this, but it makes a lot of sense to me in that, yeah, definitely, generally speaking, you probably want to have as much counsel as you have, but if the deal is too small, it might not make sense simply because you want to make a profit.
yeah. I mean, listen, everything. So like, look, like low quality lawyers and advisors generally will be very, very, very risk averse, and they will always tell their clients, no, you can't do this, or oh, that's a risk, or oh my gosh, if you're doing anything in Canada, go get a Canadian lawyer because I can't advise on Canadian law, and et cetera, et cetera. And like, clients aren't looking for lawyers to just say no all the time and just say, oh, I can't, or whatever. They're looking for partners to help them think through problems together, right? So better lawyers, in my opinion, and better advisors will say, okay, well, like let's think through this, and maybe let's problem solve on whether or not we need to bring in local counsel in a specific jurisdiction for the reasons that we know about. Of course, they can't give advice in local legal matters, but they'll be more of a thought partner, and they'll work with their counterpart at the company, the client, to really help them navigate this issue. And maybe that'll mean bringing in some other resources. Maybe it won't. It can be very fact specific.
To a certain degree, I guess you want your lawyer to be incentivized to make the deal happen if it's okay for it to happen, right?
It's a great question. So listen, so lawyers are fiduciaries to their clients. I don't know if that's a concept in Romania that you're familiar with. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So lawyers are fiduciaries, which means they have to put the interests of the client ahead of their own interests. But it's really funny that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of times the reality is lawyers are incentivized to get deals done, and there could, in theory, be a conflict between your client's interests and your interest in getting a deal done. I mean, lawyers don't generally like when deals bust. Often that means they're not getting paid their full rates. Lawyers will very oftentimes either not get paid on a broken deal, or take a pretty significant discount, right, on a broken deal. So there is an incentive to try and get a deal done, and at times I think it can unfortunately conflict, and it's tough. It's weird. It's a bit of a blind spot in the industry. In my view, it's a bit of a blind spot in the industry, because things like success fees are permitted. Things like broken deal discounts are permitted. But I think you really have to ask yourself, is that perhaps misaligning interests at times? You know what? I think they're becoming more common. The sort of historical law firm model was just bill by the hour, right? So you'd have a bunch of lawyers, they bill their time, and whether the deal closes or doesn't close, et cetera, they just will, send an invoice to a client and get paid. I think the reality is, especially with like the proliferation of private equity in the last decade, where private equity buyers, like, they're going to look at a lot of deals and they won't all get closed, right? Like this is kind of the model. They chase much more deals than they're ever expecting to win. Okay. And as a result, I mean, there's a bit of a pressure created on advisors to, like, you know, we're going to go really hard on this asset. If we don't win, you can't send me a bill for $1.5 million because we didn't even buy the business. So we can't, eat into our G&A at $1.5 million. So if we lose, you can't send us that bill. But if we win one, maybe you can, maybe there's a premium you can pay. So I definitely think success fees are much more common today than they were probably 10 years ago. Yeah.
But you're right, they do incentivize the lawyer to get a deal done at the even at the potential expense of the client. I guess maybe a better structure, and I've heard about this before, is to have the law firm bill the buyer by hour, but the buyer only pays the whole amount once a deal goes through. So then there's less of an incentive to get a deal done because you as a lawyer are going to get eventually paid out once a deal goes through.
Yeah, but if the deal doesn't go through, you don't get paid. So I think there's perhaps the same issue, right?
It's maybe less pronounced.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not, and like to be clear, I'm not trying to just, you know, shit all over success fees, because I think that they can be a useful bridge um, to allow clients to, like, really push hard at looking at deals. Um, without thinking that they're always going to get a huge legal fee if, like, the deal doesn't actually materialize. So I think there's a good space for it, and I'm very open to success based arrangements with my own clients. But just to be candid and fully transparent, I mean, I do think there's a potential for some misalignment of interests. And it's tough. I mean, it's just kind of goofy. Like, success fees are permitted. I mean, you'd have to check jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but generally, um, in the U.S., success fees are permitted.
I wanted to also ask you right now that you're on your own, what's like the basic criteria that you look for in a client?
Yeah, not no no assholes, no assholes. It's like my only rule.
What's that?
No assholes. Like, you can't be an asshole.
Oh, okay, okay. So it doesn't matter how small the deal is, you're gonna still be open to
No,
it.
I mean, listen, yeah, no, and look, I don't, I'm not the type of guy that's like, I'm only going to take certain clients that have, deals of a certain size. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, I want to basically I want to work for good people that want to do meaningful things. I've worked for some unincorporated businesses that are really, really, really small. And, whether it's them hiring a consultant or getting some commercial advice, I've worked for startups where, they're perhaps issuing a safe to an investor for a very small amount of money and they want some help. And I've worked and I continue to work for, like, big, you know, financial sponsors, right? Still doing, deals that are valued in, the very high ranges. So for me, it's not so much like industry specific. It's not so much, deal size specific. It's really like, are you the type of person that I would want to do business with? Um, do I think I'd be helping you through your problems? Are you going to respect me? Are we going to have a good working relationship? And in those cases, I would just love, I'd love those engagements and love those mandates and love those introductions. So no deal is too small by any stretch. Um, And yeah, no specific industry or anything. Just I just want to. Part of what the issue was when I worked with a big firm, for several big firms, is especially as a junior guy, like a a junior partner, et cetera. You kind of you have to do the work that gets assigned to you, right? Like you can't, you know, if you're a junior partner at a firm like Kirkland and Ellis, and the department head says, hey Ben, I want you to work on this deal, you can't say no. You're not going to say, you know what, I actually don't believe in what that company's doing. I actually think the CEO is an asshole, and I think that they're making the world a worse place, so I can't do it. Like that's not the bargain, right? Um, Firms do, and again, to give firms credit, like at an institutional level, law firms will decide what kind of clients they want and don't want, and for reputational reasons, they will turn down business. Like that happens all the time, but that doesn't always necessarily line up with your own personal beliefs, right? As an attorney. Um, so I definitely found myself at times where I was doing some work for some businesses that I wasn't exactly super thrilled about and super interested in. And part of the big appeal in starting my own business is I can really pick clients. And if we're not getting along and that it's not a great working relationship, like I can sever that relationship, and that's going to be okay. And if you want to bring some product to market that I think is going to be bad for kids and bad for safety for whatever reason, like I don't have to do that deal. I can say, I'm going to pass. And I'm not saying that that specific example happened, it didn't, in my prior life, but I think that's sort of that's kind of where I'm at with clients. So yeah, anything big, small, medium.
What do you think are the biggest, well, not necessarily just the biggest, but the biggest and most common kind of at the same time risks for a buyer?
Yeah, risks for a buyer. I mean, look, you're putting up capital, and as a general matter, I mean, so okay, let me take a step backwards. I think it really depends on the type of deal you're doing, the type of buyer you are, and the type of target you're looking at. So, for example, um, your risk tolerance as it relates to financial losses could be different for two different investors, right? Your different risk tolerance as it relates to reputational losses and reputational harm could be very different for two different investors. So I think as a general feature, um, whenever we're thinking about risk and mitigating risk, et cetera, you have to really just give bespoke, specific advice to tailor the needs of your client and the actual facts and circumstances of the deal that you're working on. So yeah, I really don't think there's sort of a one size fits all approach here, right? If you're doing a deal, like let's say you're Amazon, you're a big business, you got a ton of cash on the balance sheet, and you're looking to acquire um, a smaller business to maybe get some synergies, you know, and let's say you're looking to do like a $20 million acquisition, like that's not a material dollar amount for Amazon. Okay, like they're not going to care. That investment could go to zero, and obviously they don't want that to happen, but that's not going to move the needle. Having said that, if Amazon buys a business that's head by the next Harvey Weinstein, that could be horrible for Amazon, right? And it doesn't matter what the purchase price is. Okay, so different investors have different risk tolerances for different items. Okay. If you're looking to buy a business and you're being asked to give a personal guarantee and you're going to use a lot of leverage, a lot of debt to support the purchase, I mean, that is going to be very risky for someone like you when compared to a different investor that maybe has deeper pockets and more access to capital. Okay. So I think that, to help a client mitigate and manage risk, you really have to understand who the client is, what they care about, what their pain points are, to kind of give them the best advice. So there's no one size fits all approach. And this is part of the issue I have with a lot of these takes I see on Twitter, where people kind of profess certain things from 10,000 feet, and it's just not a reality, right? Like I've seen some tweets and stuff that are like, buying a small business is a way to kind of get around the risk of a startup. Well, I don't agree with that. I mean, I think that everything has risk, and to get a return, you're going to have to take risk, and the risks might be characterized a little bit differently. But if anyone's telling you that, hey, go buy a business and become rich and go enjoy your life on a beach, like go buy an HVAC business, like chances are they're trying to sell you something. And unfortunately, a lot of those posts come from advisors. And yeah, so that's kind of it. But I mean, I'm happy to kind of talk if you want to, if you want to kind of throw a specific situation at me and maybe ask like how I would perhaps help a client mitigate risk in that respect. Happy to do that too.
I think you touched on something that I disagree with personally, and that is that a startup is not, well, it depends, right? So you said that a acquisition is not necessarily safer or higher success percentage wise compared to a startup. Do you really think, in general, obviously the cases can depend from case to case, things can change based on the actual situation, but in general, do you actually think it's safer to start a startup than to start or than to buy an existing company? Because from what I have seen in statistics, which may be wrong, and that's why we're talking, I'm willing to be proven wrong, right? um, I've seen statistics where they basically, like, most startups 50, 60, 70% fail. Whereas in acquisitions, if you've actually done proper due diligence, once you're through, 90% of deals end up okay and profitable and fine.
Yeah. So, okay. So great. I mean, listen, great question. And I guess what I would want to know on any like what's the metric that someone is saying 90% of deals are successful? Like, does that mean like they successfully close? Does that mean that the owner of the business gets a good liquidity event and an exit event, 5 to 7 years later and made, 2, 3x their money? Like, I would really want to understand and peel back some of the layers of the onion on some of these statistics, because I've seen posts like this, right, where they're like, most startups fail, but if you buy a business, it's not going to fail, and or maybe it's not going to fail in the same quantity, et cetera. And I guess what I would say to that is, look, from a purely like statistical empirical perspective, like I don't know what is going to be more likely or less likely to succeed and fail. But what I can tell you is, if you're starting a business, the capital required to do that and the risk that you have to put up could be very minimal, right? Like, if you want to develop a product, a service, an app or something, you might need only a little bit of cash to start that, right? If you're buying a business, if you're going to try and buy a business for $4 million and you're going to try and use 90-95% of leverage, you're going to put up what, 60 grand, 70 grand, 100 grand of your own money, even more. You might have to support that with a personal guarantee. Now, all of a sudden, all the money you've made over the course of your adult life, the house, the equity you have in your house, the other assets you have, they're at risk. And if the business fails, your lenders aren't going to just say, "Oh, don't worry about it." Like, they're going to seize that collateral. They're going to realize on their security, and you could be in, it could be, you could be in rough shape. So my only advice to people that are exploring these things is, listen, be thoughtful, try and get really good advice, and go into these situations with your eyes wide open to whatever risk you're taking. Okay. If you're starting a business, you can for sure dump a ton of your own money, spend years and not be successful, and look back and you just invested $500,000 of your own money into a project that didn't work, and that sucks. And I'm with you, and that could be very bad, and you could have a similar outcome if you want to buy a small business. But the point is, there's risk in both cases. Okay. Like, buying a business is not just a shortcut to get away from certain risk. Otherwise, everybody would do it. The reality is, and when I see these takes online that are like, go max leverage, it's just so uninformed, because, like, listen, like, leverage can be very great in order to get it. I mean, look, I work in leverage finance. Like my clients do all their deals based on leverage, but none of them are of the view that it's no risk. They're doing a lot of investments. They have a very diverse portfolio. So if one of those investments fails, okay, they've got other investments that can kind of make up for it. If you're an entrepreneur and you're going all in on one business and you're leveraging it quite considerably, there's real risk there. And if you're backstopping, the deal with a personal guarantee, man, it's. I'm not saying don't do it. Look, that's never my role, and I would never say that. My point is just anyone who's trying to tell you, hey, here's how to do a great deal, and get this type of debt and then get this type of seller note and blah blah blah, so you can buy $1 million business by only putting $50,000 down or whatever. I think it's a bit of an unsophisticated take. This is my view.
I think I get your point. I actually agree with this because you're not saying it's statistically worse chances if you buy a business. You are saying it might be actually statistically better to start a business, but that is not accounting for the impact. Because you're right. If I go and I start like a website and I spend like 4 weekends coding it and maybe $5,000 on ads, what's the worst that can happen? Maybe it has like really low chances of success, high chances of failure, fine. But the worst case scenario, okay, I lost 5K for a few weekends. I'm fine. I can go start the next one and I can keep on starting them until something works. Whereas you're completely correct. If I go right now and I do an acquisition and it might be 90, 95% chances that it actually turns out profitable for me. But in that, say, hypothetical 5% case, I might end up being completely financially wiped and upside down a few million, which how the fuck am I going to pay that?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And listen, I think like again, I would never profess to be the expert in terms of probability and if you do this type of deal, this is your chance of success. Like that's not my role. I'm not that's I don't swim in that space. My business, I'm in the business of helping my clients make better risk informed decisions and just make whatever decisions they want to make commercially, do it with their eyes open to the risk. Okay? So totally. I mean, if you want to like try and develop an app, you could see that being a smaller time commitment and a smaller capital requirement to really pursue that endeavor than if you wanted to buy an HVAC business for 10 million bucks or 5 million bucks. I'm not saying which one to do. Like that's not my role. I'm not saying do one instead of the other. I'm just saying anyone who's trying to tell you that something is like low risk, just be wise to it. You just got to be wise to it because I just generally think there's a lot of folks out there that are making money. I mean, listen, like the M&A, it's an industry, right? You got brokers, you got lawyers, you got accountants, you got financial advisors, you got people like me whose livelihood depends on M&A activity. And there's a certain interest in me trying to, if Alex, you're maybe, you're an entrepreneur and you're maybe thinking of buying a business versus starting a business, and I'm an M&A lawyer, I'm going to probably try and persuade you in some ways why buying a business is great. The point is, and it might be great for you, and it might be great, it might work out tremendously well, and that's awesome. But the point is, um, there are risks. There are risks in an M&A deal, and you know especially if you're looking at one deal, you don't have a big portfolio, and you're looking at one deal, you got a backstop, a loan with like a personal guarantee. It's risky. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying like get good advice, get people that are going to help you understand those risks, and they're not just financially incented to like push you into work. Because at the end of the day, if you buy a business, if you spend 10 million bucks on buying some small HVAC business or something, and you've got, you know, and you financed it with 95% of debt, and I don't know, something happens, like another COVID happens or a pandemic happens, and your sales dip and the value dips, you could wipe out your equity like that. And if you're not able to make your debt payments, you could be looking at a lender enforcing on their collateral. It could be a really bad situation. Again, I'm not saying don't do it. You might decide to make that investment decision. But if you're doing it because you think it's sort of like a risk free or a minimally risky activity, I would just disagree with that.
Okay, it makes a lot more sense now that we delved into it, and I actually agree. I actually agree. Do you? have any advice for somebody that wants to start buying companies, but they, let's assume they don't have any experience? Maybe they're an entrepreneur, like no experience buying a business, but potentially experience operating one. What would you tell them?
Yeah, that's great. It's a great question. Um, yeah, I guess what I would say is hire good help, hire good advisors, and obviously that's a little self-serving because I think I'm a pretty good advisor, but I do think it really matters, and I think that good advisors can add just a ton of value, and you may be able to find a way that you can structure fees with an advisor to make it make sense for both sides. We talked about success fees and some of the issues, but some of the benefits of success fees are you could get access to some really good advisors without having to dump a ton of cash if they're willing to do it. So get good help. Um, and I would say be intellectually curious, like ask your advisor, push your advisors to explain strategy to you and why they're doing things certain ways, and why you're proposing certain deal terms. Like get that information, and be a very active participant. um yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, there's a lot of cliches, the best deal, sometimes the best deal is the deal you don't do and all that kind of shit. And I don't know. I don't know, but I think getting good help is important, and like taking a real active role to understand, because at the end of the day, what I'll say is M&A in particular, it's not rocket science. It's not rocket science at all. There are certain key fundamental principles that um, you care about, and anyone can understand them. Okay. I think lawyers and brokers and advisors will sometimes want you to think it's a little bit, you know, too specialized and whatever. But the reality is it's very simple. You care about financing, you care about deal certainty, right? If you're a seller, like how what are the chances a buyer can walk away from a deal and not close? Like that'd be bad. You care about post closing recourse, right? You care about price. It's not complicated, and work with an advisor who can help explain. Your partner, walk through the steps together. Um, I think that could be really really valuable.
I think I have actually. Do you follow Nick Hubert?
On Twitter, I do, the self storage guy.
Yeah, yeah, the self storage guy. He actually tweeted, I think yesterday or this week anyway, that most of the math for like making a deal happen fits on a napkin, and I'm sure that's an exaggeration, but it kind of fits in with what you just said, where this boils down to the basics. It boils down to, is the revenue any good? Are the books correct? And will the profit be able to service the debt? Right?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, I would, I don't know the tweet you're referring to, but I would definitely agree with the sentiment that, like, you know, there are certain big things that you care about and certain big things that you want to kind of manage. And keeping it simple is important. I mean, again, unfortunately, like, the devil's in the detail. There can be a huge valuation difference and a difference in price depending on how you calculate working capital and current assets, liabilities, and what you're counting as cash and debt and all that kind of stuff, which, again, would be the topic of a whole other discussion. So, there's real value in getting really good advice at a very granular level as well. But like when it comes to the client and what the client cares about, you can put things in pretty clear buckets, and keep things simple in that regard.
Okay. We're closing in on wrapping up. I have a few more questions, and then I'm going to let you do your things. Um, what is the most creative, like most interesting deal you have seen, and why are you picking this deal? And if like the more you can tell us about it, the better. But I'm not pushing that on you because I know you have some pretty big names.
Okay, yeah, probably. Okay, so I've luckily worked on a lot of really interesting and challenging deals, and I can't promise that this is maybe the most interesting, but just kind of trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, I did help a major Canadian pension plan manager and another private equity sponsor like set up a management company in the medical space and then acquire certain medical practices. They were dermatology practices. That was really cool. That was really interesting because it was just candidly um, not something that I'd really done before. So just to take a step back, financial buyers, big financial buyers, when they're looking at DSOs or healthcare businesses, et cetera, generally, not always, but generally, they're looking to buy existing platforms. Okay. They'll look to buy an existing platform that has a certain amount of practices under their belt, and they've got, good balance sheets, et cetera, et cetera. They'll use leverage and they'll buy the business and whatever. The clients in this case, what they wanted to do is they kind of wanted to build that from scratch, which was very interesting. So we created a management company from scratch, got good, like that had its own employees and its own CEO that had expertise in the area. And then we targeted a few kind of small and medium-sized practices in the dermatology space to roll into that platform. That was pretty cool. That was pretty cool, super challenging. And it's so funny because, the individual practice acquisitions were, kind of common and I'd have done stuff like that before, and that wasn't super unusual. But the idea of like contemporaneously setting up a management company, looking to do a few deals, kind of all simultaneously, and just boom, in a puff of smoke, you have an operating platform was
Basically, is that a roll up?
yeah, yeah, exactly. But I mean, like we were starting it from scratch. It was like a roll up strategy, but like starting it from scratch, which was kind of cool. So it's not like you're rolling in businesses into an existing platform. We were literally starting the platform from scratch, and that was cool. And I guess I would say this, like, it's so funny. I mean, when you're a lawyer and you're doing deals, you got to do diligence and work on the purchase agreement and definitive documents and all that kind of stuff. But when you're dealing with a seller who is like a surgeon who's doing, like dermatology surgery and skin surgery and stuff like that, it's pretty unique and interesting, not only in the types of risks and the type of things you have to think about as you're diligencing a business, but also just in terms of like managing the process. I mean, I remember we had a diligence call that we had to postpone last second because the selling doctor got pulled into emergency surgery. So, we have everybody ready to go and we've got a big, conference and we're ready to kind of, do a, 2-hour diligence call or whatever it is. And then we get a note from the banker, hey, sorry, Dr. So-and-so had to run into surgery. So they're not available today. And he's just, okay, cool. I guess we got to reschedule. And, things like that are a little bit interesting and, don't always come up day to day.
How does a roll up like that work in the sense of like, so I mean, I would in my mind the practice is basically mostly dependent on that one surgeon. After he sells the practice, does he get to be an employee in his own, well, what used to be his practice, or does he leave and the now mother company hires somebody? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So how it will typically work, especially when you're talking about like private equity buyers and financial buyers, because remember, they're generally not operators. They have to incentivize the operators and the management team to like keep doing well and keep growing the business. You can do that by a couple different, basic ways. One is you offer them some type of incentive equity, right? Stock options, profits, interest, et cetera, to help them try to increase the value of the underlying asset such that on an exit, they'll make money. The other way to do that is you require them to basically reinvest some of their proceeds. You can do that on a tax, on a pre-tax basis or a post-tax basis. Doesn't really matter for the purpose of the discussion, but the point is, like, if you were a physician and I wanted to buy your practice and I was going to give you, 10 million bucks, I might say, hey, Alex, I'm going to buy your practice for 10 million bucks, but it's going to be conditional on you reinvesting half of your proceeds. So you got to put 5 million back in the business, and you got to, maybe enter into this new employment contract with me, so I know you're not going to leave. And by the way, if you leave and fuck around in any kind of way, then that 5 million bucks that you reinvested back in the business, it could be at risk. right? So there are things that we can do to mitigate the risk of someone like a doctor walking away or not being cooperative, et cetera. And you can do this not just in the medical space, but in any business, right? That has a private equity buyer, using things like reinvestment of proceeds or rollover of proceeds, whatever you want to call it, and long-term incentive equity to incentivize and keep management.
Now that I think about it, yeah, I've seen this. I've seen this in software too, where somebody starts a startup, gets it big, they sell it, but they don't sell it for all cash. They sell it for cash and some equity in the mother company, and that kind of gets them to stick.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole purpose behind that is you just want to align incentives, right? Like if if I want to buy your practice, like let's say you're a doctor and I want to give you 10 million bucks for your practice, but I need you to continue to operate the business and be there for clients and perform the surgeries and be the face for patients and all that kind of good stuff. I can't just give you 10 million bucks with no strings attached, because guess what? You're going to probably, you may go to, go move to the Bahamas and live on a beach and enjoy cocktails for the rest of your days. That's not a good situation for me. That I haven't really protected my investment. A smarter way to do it would be, okay, I'll give you some cash, I'll give you some stock of the new mothership business or whatever, and with some requirements around, what happens to that stock if you basically cease to be the great doctor that you've been. So
In these types of situations, how long does the seller have to kind of stick around?
it's a great question. I mean, it really depends, right? If you're doing a private, like if you're doing a strategic M&A transaction, right, where it's not a financial buyer, it's not a private equity buyer, and maybe you're looking to buy a business for these like synergies. Well, you might not need a selling CEO to stick around. You might already have your CEO that's going to manage the business, and you might not need them to stick around at all. You might say, hey, here's your money. We don't care what you do. You maybe will want them to stick around for 12 months, maybe a period of time to get through the next audit, some kind of transition period. That would be much more common in like the strategic M&A space. In the pure like financial M&A space, like leverage buyouts, private equity sponsors, et cetera, where the buyers are generally not operators, you're going to want them to stick around a lot longer, as a general matter. And you would typically tie terms relating to their equity to your own exit as a financial sponsor, right? So like if you were a doctor and we bought your practice and we made we got you to reinvest 50% of your proceeds, I mean, that's just going to come in the form of stock. And if we terminate you for cause, maybe we can buy those back at a penny, buy that stock back at a penny, et cetera. And there's a lot of variance. And again, it's very fact specific. I don't like to, there's not always kind of cookie cutter answers for every different case, and every situation deserves to be evaluated on its own merits. But yeah, it depends on the type of buyer, it depends on the type of deal.
The more I grow up, the more I notice good lawyers and good advisors in general never have a cookie cutter blanket statement. And it makes sense because usually you can't have one. And it's not like you might be able to say generally this is the way it happens, but people interpret that.
No, totally. And again, I think that kind of just goes back to like, to give the best advice possible as an advisor, you have to know the facts and circumstances of what you're dealing with, right? Like it very well could be the case that I want to buy your practice because it's a great location, you've got a great stable of clients, and I actually think that maybe you're not the best doctor, and I've got other doctors that can service your practice, and I don't really care. Like I might not really care if you stick around. I might not want you to stick around. That's going to be very different than if I'm like starting a platform from scratch and I really need you. So again, it's very fact specific. Generally, the private equity playbook would be, assuming you're not trying to replace the management team, you'd want to incentivize the existing management team to stay with you, reinvest proceeds, and give them a lot of put a lot of risk on their equity, for them to stick around. And you could do other things too, right? Like you could do you could do an earnout in your transaction, which is a little bit less on the operator, strictly from an operator perspective. But let's say there's a real valuation gap, right, between the bid ask of buyer and seller on price. I mean, you can sometimes bridge that gap by saying, okay, fine, well, we'll do the deal at this price subject to an earnout. So if the metrics, if we really do achieve the numbers that you're projecting and you're forecasting, then you will receive 100 cents on the dollar of what you're asking for. But if you don't, then we're not. It's a little different from the operator, and how long you're going to retain an operator perspective. But like an earnout can be a very effective tool um, to bridge a gap. And, terms of an earnout could be 6 months, a year, 2 years, kind of depends.
Do you see any trends in 2023 in like M&A?
Yeah, no, totally. I think, look, like 2020, 2021 were like banner years for global M&A activity. Um, I think like deal volume and deal size records were, I believe, broken in both of those years in M&A. I think you're definitely seeing a little bit of contraction, the last 12 months or so. Um, I think the multiples that buyers are willing to do deals on have contracted a little bit. I think that buyers are being perhaps a little bit more disciplined um, in terms of investments they're making, right? So I think like the frenzy of activity, you're not really seeing it right now. M&A has definitely slowed. Having said that, there's a lot of private equity sponsors out there with a lot of capital to deploy. So maybe they're just going to look for a little bit more creative ways to deploy that capital. So, whereas they might have been willing to, do a buyout a year or two ago for a certain business, maybe now they'll want to invest into a preferred equity instrument or maybe some debt or some mezz debt or something like that. So I guess what I would say trends are, I think M&A is definitely slowing. Having said that, there are still a lot of investors out there that are looking for creative ways to deploy capital. So I think it's just incumbent on any kind of advisors and folks in the space to just, be creative and think creatively and stuff like that. So
Would you say it's maybe a bit more of a buyer's market than it used to be?
yeah, definitely. I mean, listen, I think the last, like, ever since I moved, so I moved to New York City in 2015, and it was just like a roaring seller's market. And that continued, I think, up until, I mean, it's still probably, overall a seller's market. But, that it was amazing how much of a seller's market was, not just in terms of valuations, but also in terms of things like financing risk. And I mean, if you were a buyer and you wanted to be competitive in an auction, I mean, you had to, you couldn't have a financing condition that went away long ago. And yeah, and we had a lot of private equity buyers that were even fully, backstopping full purchase price with equity. So what that means is, if the debt didn't show up, then they were going to draw on an equity commitment to fund the full purchase price. We're talking, big deals. Um, I think that is definitely moving back a little bit towards the center of the fairway as it comes to financing risk and things like that. Um, yeah, for buyers. But yeah, it's been a seller's market for a long time, and that just means not only prices are really high, but deal terms are very advantageous for sellers. Like things like rep and warranty insurance and indemnification and all that kind of stuff are manifestations of it being a seller's market. So I think that stuff's starting to shift a little bit.
Okay, that's a good trend to mention. Anything that you want to shill or where people can find you, a website, anything like that? Because I'm gonna add these in the description.
Yeah, sure. No, I appreciate it. And I guess let me just say it's been a real pleasure, and I appreciate you having me on. This has been a real treat, and I've loved our conversation. But yeah, no, if folks want to get in touch with me, um, my website is vickeryadvisory.com. My Twitter is my name, Benjamin Adelson. I have an Instagram for Vickery Advisory. I think it's just Vickery Advisory is the handle. And yeah, if you go on my website, I mean, my email's there, my phone number is there. I'm pretty easy to get in touch. So yeah, if someone's watching this and they want some corporate help, some M&A help, would love to chat.
And I really want to enforce that while we didn't mention any names of deals that Ben has done, he really has done big deals. Trust me on this one. if you actually call him, he's probably gonna, if you look like a serious client, he's probably gonna share those things with you. But safe to assume he is big, he is good. He you should contact him.
I appreciate that. No, I appreciate it, Alex. And no, it's been a pleasure. And yeah, obviously nothing in this discussion is, legal advice. And, I think there's no substitute for hiring your own lawyer. And, obviously all the kind of normal disclaimers apply. But yeah, if anyone wants to chat, would obviously love to chat.
Hey, thank you for coming on.